to listen in, community, conversations, connection. This is WOWD LP Tacoma Park, 94.3. And I'm Pam Holland, and today I'm here with our mayor, Kate Stewart. And we're going to talk about Kate's ways of listening in her life. And, of course, only a week ago, we had some for some of us, very shocking news about our elected officials. And so some of the things that Kate and I had been thinking of talking about started to seem sort of unimportant. And so I've asked her a question that came to me after listening to President Obama's press conference a couple of days ago, and he talked about the difference between campaigning and governing. And so I've invited Kate to share with us what her experience has been of governing here in Tacoma Park. And if you could tell our listeners when you took office and what your history has been with governance in Tacoma Park.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Pam, for having me this morning. I took office as mayor last November, so I've been in office for a year in the position of mayor. And before that, I was on the city council. I finished out the term that Kay Daniels-Cohen was in office after she passed away. I had won a special election. So I've been on the city council and in the position of mayor for a couple of years. And this question you ask about the difference between campaigning and governing, I think is a really interesting one to think about right now as we're transitioning to a new president. What I have found is that at campaigns, especially the first time you do it, when you haven't been an elected official before, it's easy to point out all the things that we're not doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to be critical and to say we should be doing all these other things. And then once you're elected and in the position of governing, I think one of my favorite quotes, council member Peter Kovar, who I serve with on the city council, he and I were talking about this one day, and he had worked for Barney Frank on Capitol Hill. And he said, Barney had this great quote where he said, I would have voted for myself the first time. I'm not so sure the second time, and definitely not the third time. And you think about that because once you're in the position to govern, and as we were talking about before, your job is really to represent your constituents, to do the homework, to make some very tough decisions. And sometimes that's a very difficult thing to do when you're weighing we have 17,000 residents.
Wow.
And we don't have that many different opinions, but we have a lot of different opinions.
Yes.
And then you weigh the constraints of our city budget, of the capacity of what our city staff can be doing, and then you have to make decisions.
Yes. Well, I, for one, as a Tacoma Park resident for 26 years now, am thrilled with our city governance. So going back to a little bit more about you personally, you shared with me, I believe, that your brother is a police officer?
Yes, and he's a police officer in Clearwater, Florida.
Uh-huh. And others in your family are?
My grandfather, growing up in New York City, he was a detective
in
New York City in the 70s and early 80s. And then I come from a long line of school teachers.
Mm-hmm.
My mother, my sister are all school teachers.
Uh-huh. Great. So a whole family of public service. Tell our listeners, what does the idea of listening in mean to you personally or professionally?
Well, I think as you say, there are two parts to listening in. One is the personal, how I listen in my life, and what I try to do is really think about what my priorities are and values. Because with all the noise and everything that's out there, to come back to when a decision needs to be made or we need to move forward on something, really coming back to what my priorities are and values is important.
Mm-hmm.
I think in terms of externally listening in, it's important to really get beyond what people might initially say to really hear what their concerns are. I think many times what I find is that because people feel very passionately about issues in Tacoma Park, which is wonderful, that they come at an issue with a lot of passion and getting into what is really their concerns, what they need from the city government or moving forward. We really have to hear what is going on there. So I think it's, I was at actually talking to a group of Girl Scouts the other day, some daisies actually, and first graders. And one of the questions one of the little girls asked me is, how do you deal with people yelling at you all the time?
Great question.
It was a really good question. Sometimes there is a bit of yelling. And I said, the important thing is really to remember where the person is coming from. Because usually if somebody is at that point, they're caring very deeply about what they're bringing to me.
Mm-hmm.
So it's moving beyond that how a message is being delivered to really hear what's important to that person, what their concern is, what the issue is, to try and resolve it.
Mm-hmm. Where do they hurt, perhaps? Yes. So you shared with me that one person who was very influential in teaching you to listen in, or that you learned from in terms of listening in, was your grandfather. Can you tell us a little bit more about your grandfather?
Sure. So, as I said, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and my parents got divorced when I was around 7, and so I spent a good deal of time with my grandparents. We lived with them for a while. And my grandfather, as I mentioned, was a New York City detective, and many times he would be on the night shift. But it was hard for me to go to bed without him home because of worrying about him. And so lots of times he would come home, he would eat his dinner, it would be late at night, and it would just be the two of us. And we loved to play cards. And we played Jim Rummy a great deal, and cribbage, which is a game I have no idea how to play now. When I look at it, I'm like, how did I ever play that when I was, 8, 9, or 10 years old? And it was during those late nights that we would talk, and it was more that he would listen.
Mm-hmm.
As I was sort of working through whatever issues, an 8, 9-year-old, 10-year-old has. And, growing up, having parents who got divorced, and then moving a good deal, and it was the 70s, the late 70s in New York City. There was a lot going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned from him really the importance of listening, letting people talk, and kind of work through and figure out sometimes for themselves what really is the question that needs to be answered.
And did you share with him your fears for his safety?
Oh, yes. And it was interesting because he did not bring work home. So I could not tell you actually what his job was like from his perspective. And that's what I mean by he was a great listener.
And how did he address your fears?
I think he really taught me the skills of listening to my own instincts. Growing up in Brooklyn, we call it, going with your gut. And helping me have those tools to really work through some issues and think about them on my own.
And so when you have a tough situation or a question that your guts doesn't seem to be answering quickly enough, what kind of strategies do you use to find your way to those issues?
Well, I think there's a couple of things that I do. One, if it's something that I have some time to kind of ponder and work through, I'm a runner, so I run. And if it's not possible to run, I take very long walks. So actually, one of the things when I was thinking about running for mayor, after a couple of people had asked me to consider it, I actually went away for a weekend and to the beach,
Uh-huh.
and put my phone away, and I just took a 3-hour walk
Uh-huh.
on the beach, and didn't, think specifically about it, but spent the time just being in that moment. And when I got back to where I was staying, I basically just asked myself the question: Is this the next step for me? Is this what I want? Is this what I want for my family?
Uh-huh.
And the answer was yes.
Uh-huh.
So it was taking that time to just really be able to let all the emotion and different thoughts and information process itself in my mind when I was not being distracted by email or phone.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say, there was one point when I was walking on the beach, because it was in the spring, so there wasn't a lot of people around. I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I'm out here by myself with no phone. And it's just so funny how dependent we've become.
Right.
So
Right.
I think when I have the time to do that, I go running, and it just, or a long walk, it helps me. If it's more in the moment that something needs to get decided, I try and go back to a question that I've used a number of times throughout my life in different professional situations is, who do I carry with me?
Right.
I ask myself that question. At this moment, who am I working on behalf of? Who do I carry with me? And that really helps kind of cut through sometimes all the noise and the back and forth, the details of what we have to decide, to really get to the heart of who needs to be best served by this decision.
Mm-hmm. And so when you ask that question, who do I carry with me, you're partly asking the question, who am I serving? Who are my constituents? But are you also asking whose voices do I hear that help me to be my best self? Perhaps, your grandfather, other figures. I mean,
absolutely.
and if so, who are those other
People in my life.
Yeah, who do you carry with you that helps you to make those sometimes difficult choices?
Mm-hmm. So it's definitely the constituents
Uh-huh.
who live here in Tacoma Park, and I would say sometimes it's the ones who aren't always able to come to our city council meetings or provide comments as people can normally do. Sometimes it's just remembering a conversation I had, when bumping into somebody in the market or taking a walk along Sligo.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the things that I can reflect on,
Mm-hmm.
Which are very important to me. And then I think living in Tacoma Park, we're really lucky to have some amazing leaders very close to us.
Mm-hmm.
I think being able to look at somebody lead like Jamie Raskin has
Mm-hmm.
been really inspirational to me. And as I was mentioning before,
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, one of the things I like to do that kind of drives my 2 kids crazy is that I still clip things from newspapers
Uh-huh.
And keep little sayings. And it's just, I think, helpful to ground
Mm-hmm.
us as we go along in our busy lives. And so one of the quotes I have stuck to my computer here is something that Jamie Raskin said during his campaign, and that was in the newspaper when they did a profile of him. And it said, life is hard enough with all the natural misfortunes that we don't need to compound it with socially created injustice. The role of government should be to liberate people from injustice as much as possible.
Great.
And I just thought that was a great quote and got at the essence of why it's important to serve.
Right. And I was sharing with Kate that just before I was coming here, I happened to pick up a list of quotes that I had sitting in my office, and the one at the top was, "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a great battle." And I have Philo question mark, so apparently I'm not certain who said that. But at any rate, it is something I think that speaks to me because I am sometimes very judgmental. And I used to think when I would see people on the sidewalk who were frowning, I would think, what's wrong with them? Why don't they smile? And, now that I've lived a little life and experienced some other, some pain that may not be visible, I have more sympathy for people who aren't smiling when they walk down the sidewalk, and I just try to be the one to smile.
Right.
And most often they'll smile back.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned that you often think about who do you carry with you. Is there anyone besides the little girl who asks you what to do about being yelled at? Are there any other specific twinkles of wisdom that may have come from your constituents? Or
Mm-hmm. Well, I think also there was, and this happened maybe a year or two ago, I was talking to a group of young people in our community. Almost all of them were young people of color, and there was a young man, I think he's around the age of 14, and he said, given what's going on out there in the world in this context of our country right now, he never thought he would be able to trust a police officer.
mm-hmm.
And he said, he reflected on it, he said, maybe someday if I have kids, they can. He's like, but I'm just not sure I can. One, it broke my heart.
Yes.
To hear something
Yes.
like that from someone so young. And then two, it really made me realize that in our community, while I don't think we have huge issues like other places around the country right now, but building relationships is something that is ongoing, and we need to pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that right now we're working on, I'm working with Megan Murphy, who's at Capital City Cheesecake,
Mm-hmm.
and one of our officers, Captain Collington. We've started this initiative a few months ago called Unity in the Community.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really about creating relationships in our community. It started off creating relationships between our police department and residents, specifically young people in our community. But we've been reflecting since the election, does this need to actually broaden
Right.
this initiative
Right.
and think about relationships in more general ways? But carrying with me that comment of that young man
Mm-hmm.
really was something that spurred me on to think about, okay, how in Tacoma Park can we really work to build stronger relationships? And I think the fact that we've been doing that has been really helpful in this post-election time.
Right.
And we're building stronger relationships with our public schools here in Tacoma Park. I've been in contact a great deal with our principals at Tacoma Park Middle School and Piney Branch. And I was even speaking with Ms. Deeney, the Tacoma Park Middle School principal, last Friday. And she mentioned to me that given everything that is going on right now in the country, the fact that we had started building this relationship over the last few months was very important to her.
Great.
Because she very much felt supported. She knew her students were supported by our city, and that when if there is a need to have to ask for the assistance of the police department, she now knows more of them and is more comfortable doing that.
Great. So this is WOWD LP Tacoma Park 94.3. I'm Pam Holland, and this is Listen In Community Conversations Connection. And I'm just speaking with Kate Stewart, the mayor of Tacoma Park. And if you missed part of the show, or if you've missed our previous episodes, you can find those at listeninshow.org. And Kate just mentioned Megan Murphy of the Capital City Cheesecake, who will be speaking with me on Wednesday, December 6th, here on Listen In Show. So tune in for that. And let's see, I had another thought that somehow slipped away when I started thinking about Megan. I wanted to know because I was away last weekend, I wanted to know what went on Friday night at the meeting about, I don't know, I would say about solidarity, but I wasn't there and I don't remember what it was called. And also to offer you an opportunity to let people know of other things that might be going on in the city to help us through this time of transition.
Great. So last Friday night, thanks to Seth Grimes, Jen Wofford, and Nadine Block, there was a gathering in solidarity to have our community come out and express their solidarity with particularly immigrants, people of the Muslims, LGBT community, people of color in our community, basically everyone.
Yeah.
Most especially those who, given the rhetoric of this last campaign and the threats, quite frankly, towards specific members of our community, to really talk about supporting them and to reaffirm the values in our community. You know, a lot has changed since last Wednesday, since Tuesday's election, but what hasn't changed is Tacoma Park, our values and what we believe in. That hasn't changed, and that won't change. And so this was really a time for all of us to come together and reaffirm those values and to support members of our community who are feeling scared right now.
Yes.
And there's a lot of uncertainty. So it was a wonderful event. I really want to thank Seth, Jen, and Nadine for pulling it together. We filled the parking lot in front of Piney Branch Elementary School. I mean, I would say there were probably 500 or more people there.
And it was held outside?
We held it outside. Magpie, the band, played music. It was so that was really uplifting and very unifying. We had some speeches. Our state delegates, Will Smith and David Moon, were there, as well as representatives from Casa de Maryland and members of the Muslim community. Myself and Councilmember Rizzi Qureshi were able to also speak. And it was just really a time for people, I think, to come together and, again, reaffirm what we believe here in Tacoma Park. And it was, I think, much needed.
Yes.
We had wonderful, it was, the best part about it, we're seeing all the young people who were there in our community. People made signs.
And is there, for those of us who were away, I wasn't here that evening, or I would have definitely been there, are there ways, or is there any audio or video, or do you know of anything that's available?
So I know there's a lot being posted on Facebook.
Okay. on the cities? Or
not
just
on the city's Facebook page, but I think people's Facebook pages. And I do know that the organizers, Seth, Nadine, and Jen, did ask people to fill out their names on forms to be able to bring people together. So I know they are organizing another meeting.
Great.
Great. You know, I think it's one thing, as we talked about last week, coming together at how we did on Friday night, and then as we move forward, you know, depending on what happens once President-elect Trump gets in office, there likely times that we are going to have to take stands here in Tacoma Park. And so really thinking it through how that's organized and who wants to take part in that, I think, is the next step that the organizers are looking at.
Great.
I think from the city council's perspective and what we're doing right now is reflecting on what it might mean if our federal funds are taken away because we're a sanctuary city. And that is one of the things that President-elect Trump has said he will do in the first 100 days. And so we're looking at now what that might mean for the city.
So specifically, he has said that he would take away money from sanctuary cities? And can you describe for our listeners what a sanctuary city is?
Sure, and there's information up on the city website, and there's actually a very good article in today's Washington Post in the Metro section.
Okay, great.
Because this is an issue that, I think Mayor Bowser in Washington, D.C. has spoken to, Montgomery County Council spoke to it last week, and there are mayors from sanctuary cities all over the country. I think the mayor of Los Angeles came out, Chicago. So it'll be interesting moving forward to see what happens. But basically what it means in Tacoma Park is that we do not ask for check people's basically for immigration status.
Okay.
If they are here, and so we do not work with the immigration to deport people. That is not information that if somebody is even arrested, that we do not, our police department is not looking for whether or not someone is documented or undocumented.
Okay.
If somebody, in our city, in our municipality, non-U.S. Citizens can vote if you're a resident, so you can register to vote. You are not asked if you are documented or undocumented.
Mm-hmm.
It just is whether or not you're a resident here.
Okay. So we are a very inclusive city. No surprise to folks out there that Tacoma Park is a welcoming place. Do you have any other thoughts about any other events coming up that you want to share, or any other thoughts about?
Well, I would say there's a lot going on, so stay tuned. One is as soon as we have the information about the next steps for the folks who are organizing, who helped organize the gathering on Friday night to see what happens as President-elect Trump takes office. Stay tuned for that, and as soon as I have information on that, I can give you. Pam.
Okay.
In addition, stay tuned for next steps on unity in the community. One of the things that will happen on November 19th is dialogues between police officers and young people in our community.
Mm-hmm.
That Lorik Charkoudian, one of our residents here in Tacoma Park, is a trained mediator and has worked with police departments across Maryland, most recently in Baltimore. So she has actually volunteered her time to help us do some of these dialogues between our police officers and young people. That will happen this weekend. And then the next step for unity and community, one of the things we're looking at is offering a series of workshops for residents to dig deeper into race relations, thinking about that in our community, and we're working with some community members on setting that up, and that will probably likely kick off in January.
Great.
I think those are some of the and I should also mention another thing that we're really working on in our city is building partnerships. It's relationships and partnerships.
Mm-hmm.
And by partnerships, I mean partnerships with some of our institutions that have been in our community. So Montgomery College, the hospital, Washington Adventist Hospital, Washington Adventist University. Over the years, as a community, we've had kind of ups and downs in our relationships.
Yes.
I think now, more than ever, is a time that we need to really be coming together as a community.
Yes.
So there's a group of residents who are also working with some professors at Washington Adventist University
Mm-hmm.
to build stronger relations there. And so one of the things that we're looking at is having some panel discussions with some of the professors and community members, again, around some issues regarding race relations and community building.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot going on.
Yes.
So people should stay tuned. I will send that information to you. In addition, I would just say, as we're moving forward in this uncertain time, we will be putting information up on the city's website.
Right.
We do have. I put up a note the day after the election on Wednesday, just again reaffirming that we have not changed
Mm-hmm.
here in Tacoma Park.
Mm-hmm.
The values we have and how we're going to function as a city government has stayed the same. And our police chief has also put up a blog to make sure that, again, people understand, as we were talking about before, how our officers go about doing their job.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. With respect for all.
Right, exactly. And we will continue to put information up like that. And also in our newsletter that goes out monthly, people should look there as well for more information. And then if there's anything that people need that they're like, well, this is missing.
Mm-hmm.
We're always open to call us, email any member of the city council and myself. I think this is a time that's very uncertain. And
yes.
We're all going to need to listen in
Yes.
to ourselves and to each other,
Mm-hmm.
and come together as a community.
Thank you so much, Kate, for being here today. It's been a great pleasure to speak with you. Stay tuned, listeners, for more information about what's going on here in Tacoma Park.